Well, retirees could now pay for the Albanese government's re-election. The government has been trying to pass a new tax law to increase the tax on super funds on balances of more than $3 million, lifted to 30% from 15%. Now, a lot of people say, oh, people on that money, they can afford it. Maybe right. But two things are a worry. One, this is not indexed. A $3 million balance today might not sound that much after inflation after a decade or two or three. And of course, the Greens might say, well, let's make that threshold $2 million. And then you've got our vote, Labor. That's why the Parliamentary Budget Office reckons this tax change, will raise serious money, nearly $7 billion a year within 10 years. But there's another thing. Say you've got shares or property in that super fund. This new tax will apply to the assessed value of these things, unrealised gains, even though, one, you might have to sell them to pay the tax, and two, what if you pay a tax for a property that's supposedly worth, $1 million now, but you go to sell it and it's actually worth much less. But you get a refund? At least the Treasurer today was saying politicians and judges on generous defined benefits would also pay. Joining me is Jeff Wilson, who has more than 45 years' experience in investment markets and founded Wilson Asset Management. Jeff Wilson, thanks for joining me. What is wrong with this plan?
Well, increasing the tax on super, let's put that to one side, increasing it by another 15%. I don't think anyone's that concerned about that for people that have more than $3 million in there. But the incredibly illogical, unfair or un-Australian, and as one of our investors said to me, they believe it's criminal, is the fact that it's taxing unrealised gains. So a paper profit, a profit that may never occur. It's that. And the second part is the failure to index. So, various people have run numbers, and eventually, if the 3 million cap isn't indexed, then eventually every worker in Australia will be paying this additional tax on their super. And it's really bad, for younger Australians. And I think they're talking about, in a number of years, a couple of million people being caught by this.
A couple of million is a lot. Tell us what sort of difficulties does it raise? So you've got, say, some of your super in property or shares. It's unrealised. You haven't actually sold it yet. There's a nominal worth on it that you're taxed on. How could that go wrong?
Well, just think about, we've had this super system, working very efficiently. It's actually created $4.2 trillion. That is risk capital. What could go wrong if you're a farmer and you have to pay tax on the theoretical value of your land, and when you have no intention of ever selling it, where do you get the money from, to pay that tax? Also, if you might get taxed on you might invest in a company, it goes up significantly. Then you have to pay tax on it. Then, as we've seen, the volatility in the stock market recently, then the value of that company falls significantly. Unfortunately, you don't get that, get a refund back from the government. So to me, it stops people from committing risk capital. 50 to 60% of the startups in Australia, they get their money from self-managed super funds. Now, why would I invest, say $100,000 in or less in a small risky company? Why would I do that if the value goes up? I'm going to have to pay tax on it. This, taxing unrealised gains has failed globally, and it is just bad tax policy.
Well, this is a government that's, of course, promised more money than it's got and is desperate to get some money from somewhere. Now, the thing is, Jeff, as you know, when new taxes are imposed on things, then the government assumes that those things will stay there to be taxed. What, in fact, do you think will happen if this tax comes in? Will people run down their super funds and invest somewhere else? Will the money actually be there for the government to get all these billions it's expecting?
Unfortunately, another consequence is that the taxes they anticipate they'll raise, they will not raise. Now, we've seen that in the UK recently. They brought in a increased their capital gains tax by 20 odd percent, and the tax take actually dropped by 10%. People are smart. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. I've had people, some of our shareholders, we've got 130,000 shareholders. We've got a lot of them have been contacting me. One in particular rang me the other day. He's going to take his money out of the fund. He's got more than $3 million in there, and he's either going to put in his principal place of residence himself, or give to his children or grandchildren to do that. We've done a white paper on this, trying to get people to understand, and we estimate that 155 billion is going to come out of those self-managed super funds and go into the property market, just at a time we don't need more demand in the property market, because still your principal place of residence is tax-free. People don't mind paying additional tax in their super fund. What they don't like is having to pay tax or taking the enormous risk that they may pay the tax and the value of their investments might fall significantly. Now, anyone that's a little bit older, we've lived through times, whether it's the GFC or the '87 stock market crash, where your investments in the stock market might fall 50 or 60%. Eventually, they recover, but if you pay tax on the higher amount, and then they fall significantly, and you're older, then you're taking an enormous amount of risk. So, unfortunately, it's the dismantling of the superannuation system. And a lot of, to me, anyone who has it explained to them then understands how unfair and illogical it is.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time the government has had a tax backfire in it. I mean, the hiking up cigarette excise to such a level that poor people can't afford legal cigarettes, buy the illegal stuff instead, setting off an organised crime spree and a fall in taxes to the government. It's just unbelievable. This could be one of them. Jeff Wilson, thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thanks, Andrew.